big, newsy conversation. So happy to have you, Ambassador. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here. Thank you.
There's nothing going on.
No.
What are we going to talk about? How are we going to fill the time? I think the place I want to start is just a very simple question. Is there still a US-EU or US-UK trade deal as of today?
Well, just this morning, I met with my counterparts from each of those countries, and we talked about the deals and we talked about implementation. So the answer is yes. Obviously, they both shared their views with us on, the president's recent discussion on Greenland and things like that. But in my view, we made those agreements. With respect to the UK, for example, they're implementing aspects of it, opening their market to U.S. beef. We've opened our market to their beef. We've made a deal with them on pharmaceuticals. That's in implementation. The European Union has frankly been much slower to implement. So when they say things like, well, maybe we should put this on pause, they're putting on pause a process that's already been super slow. So the facts on the ground haven't changed about a ton with that either.
What was their tone in these meetings? Do you get the sense that they're going to follow through with threats of retaliation?
Well, I mean, listen, on the EU side, I was talking to the Commission, and they have a diverse array of member states. And some member states, like the French, are much more eager to retaliate. They always have been. Others are less so. They're more pragmatic. They have to get a lot of folks on board in order to retaliate. I think that would be unwise if they retaliated and escalated. I've been counseling just they should treat the Greenland matter for what it is, which is a national security matter, and they should compartmentalize it. I understand that that's.
Are we compartmentalizing it? We're not doing that. I mean.
Well, listen. I'm the U.S. Trade Representative. I'm not the National Security Advisor, and certainly not the President of the United States. We have a trade deal we agreed to last summer with the EU. It was not comprehensive. It was not a deal that said, here's a deal, and if there's any other issues, we just won't raise them. We won't talk about them. We'll pretend they don't exist, right? It wasn't a comprehensive trade agreement. We had a trade agreement about certain matters. We should proceed on those matters, and things that fall outside the four corners of that agreement should be dealt with in their own way.
As I've been covering trade, speaking to sources, there's something interesting I've discovered about you, which is when you talk to Democrats, even some of your predecessors, they have really nice things to say about you.
I'm a nice guy. What can I say?
No, but I think this is, I'm still new to Washington, but I think this is rare in Washington. But one of the things they do say is that you have probably the hardest job in Washington. And I think they would point to what happened over the weekend as a reason why. You go and you make all these deals, and the president uses tariffs and perhaps puts them in jeopardy. I mean, how would you respond to something like that?
I mean, listen, the president for decades has talked about the need to use tariffs for a variety of issues. And this is why I work for the president, because I agree with him on this, right? So for me, the fact that we're using tariffs again, and I say again because for centuries, that's what the United States have done. That's what other countries have done. We had this 30-year aberration where we pretended that we were at the end of history and we didn't need to protect our supply chains and we didn't need to protect American workers. And that was the aberration. So now we're actually back into normal history, which is we have to use tariffs, we have to use trade measures, we use them for protection, we use them for geopolitical ends. I mean, that's actually the normal course of history, and we're just going back to that.
I think CEOs just want to understand what the lay of the land is. Most CEOs I talk to, and even small business owners I talk to, they say, I don't care. Just tell me what the tariffs are going to be. Tell me so I can plan and make sure that I don't have to hire a bunch of expensive people to explain to me how it works, and just keep things consistent. Is that something you can promise them in the years ahead?
So first of all, I'm sympathetic to those views, and you have to be able to distinguish, because some CEOs come and they'll say, well, I just want certainty, and they're talking about what you're saying is, what's the rate going to be? How should I redo my supply chains? That, I work with these folks. I try to give much certainty as they can. Then there are other folks who come and they say, well, I want certainty. And what they mean is, I want to go back to status quo ante and have it never change and pretend that we don't have these geopolitical issues and pretend that supply chains don't matter, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's out the window, right? We're not doing that. But the first part is important. Now, we have a trade we have an international trading system that's been built up over 70 years, and we have moved within the past 12 months to change it, right? This is, it built up over a long time. It's hard to change overnight, but we've moved extremely quickly. People still talk a lot about, April 2nd, Liberation Day, and how high these tariffs were. But when you really look at it, around August 1st, the president announced a bunch of deals. We set a bunch of tariffs in place. We have had, some outliers, right? We've had India's kind of on its own path right now. We have Brazil. We have this most recent thing that's happened. But as a general matter, the structure of our trade policy is pretty clear. China has the highest tariffs, right? Not because we're anti-China, just because they have all this overproduction and they have these non-market practices that are incompatible with our market. The next highest tariffs are really Southeast Asia and people who have a lot of Chinese content running through those countries. Then our next highest tariffs generally are on, who we'd call the allies with whom we still have trade issues, the Japan, Europe, et cetera. And then in the Western Hemisphere, we have our lowest tariffs, about 10% generally, because geopolitically, that's where we want supply chains to be fundamentally, right? We want them close to the United States. We want them to be right there. So you can almost see these concentric circles going out. Doesn't mean it's always going to be perfectly like that. We'll have issues come up and we need to address them as they arise. I mean, COVID was something that came up that no one, you couldn't account for. We're going to have geopolitical events that drive trade policy sometimes. National security will have an effect on this too.
Are you meeting with any of your Chinese counterparts while you're here?
I'm not.
Secretary Bessent, perhaps.
He did already. So the day before I got here, Hu Lifeng, Vice Premier, was here, and he met briefly with Secretary Bessent. So I think it was just a short, brief meeting on logistics, frankly.
Is it your understanding that, as it stands today, China is honoring its deal to kind of let rare earths flow and purchase soybeans, things of that nature? Are they in compliance?
Yes. They just recently completed their soybean purchases for this sale season. We have the next sale seasons coming up, the end of this year and then every year thereafter for 25 million tons. So we'll watch that. On the rare earths, they're not flowing exactly how we would love them to flow, but they're flowing enough that they are in compliance with the agreement we've made. The factories and manufacturers are getting what they need in terms of rare earths, and importantly, on our own in the United States, we're developing our own rare earth capacities, including with partners such as Australia. We're putting government money to make projects that maybe weren't economically viable a year ago, to make them economically viable now so that we can have our own supplies of rare earths.
What you said, they're not flowing as perhaps you would like exactly. What does that mean? What are they not doing that you would like to see?
Oh, well, listen, in a perfect world, they don't have any export controls at all on rare earths, which, by the way, are not really a complex technology. It's a technology that the United States pioneered in the 60s. We worked with the Japanese on it in the 70s. We've never export controlled them. We actually sold this technology, foolishly, to the Chinese in the 90s, and now the Chinese are taking a basic technology and control. Usually when we do export controls, they're for things like AI chips and parts of satellites and nuclear weapons and things like that. We don't do it for basic commodities like rare earths.
I have one more just on the potentially higher tariffs on a couple EU nations and the UK. Like, what is the value of a trade deal with the US? Is it the case that you can sign a trade deal with the US and it is possible that President Trump will impose higher tariffs down the line? Is that some sort of clause in the deals that countries should expect? How do you think about that?
So some of our deals have a clause that specifically say either party, can use measures if they need to. It's in their national interest. Okay. I mean, if you look at the World Trade Organization agreements, which people like to highlight as, oh, here's the permanence and the clarity, et cetera, even that has an exception for essential security, where if you have a national security issue, you can impose tariffs, you can take trade measures. So it's not even a new idea that you have these types of exceptions. Now, people can argue with us and say, well, that's not national security, but that's for us to judge, right? It's for each country to judge what's in their essential security interest. So this is it always has been the reality under the WTO, under the GATT, under these agreements. That's just always a possibility.
How would the tariffs be implemented, the ones that President Trump has threatened? How would those be implemented? Is that under IEEPA, which is currently being challenged by a few small businesses at the Supreme Court, or what is the authority that you all would use?
I mean that's one way, right? I don't want to get ahead of any executive order that we might put out shortly, but that's certainly one option.
I didn't even know you could apply tariffs to a single EU nation?
So you can, and the reason why is because even though the EU is a customs union of sorts, and they have a single tariff going in, when we import into the United States, we do it on a country-by-country basis. So if we import from France, it says country of origin France. It doesn't say country of origin EU, so you can assess it on that basis. And we have in the past, by the way.
Something I found interesting about President Trump is that he seems to really like bilateral deals,
Yes.
right? Let's put the EU aside for a second because they're a special case, but he likes the one-on-one deal. So what is the case for the U.S. to maintain the USMCA North America trade agreement?
What is the case? I think that's the fundamental question. The U.S.-Canada economic relationship is completely different from the U.S.-Mexico economic relationship. The labor situation in Mexico is different. They have a cartel situation down there that bleeds into their economic structure. The types of barriers we face in Canada are different. It's things about dairy and how they treat our digital services and things like that. With Mexico, it's they have labor issues, they have environmental issues that even as a conservative Republican, there are things they do down there that make it hard for us to have a level playing field. So they're just fundamentally different. And by the way, people are fond of saying, "Oh, USMCA, it's a $31 trillion deal," and it's like, yeah, but 29 trillion is the U.S. and there's actually not a lot of trade between Canada and Mexico. It's fairly minimal. So the idea that Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. all have to be in the same trade deal, it's more a function of almost foreign policy and wanting to look like we have this integrated market, as opposed to the reality of the economics, which is there's a U.S.-Canada economic relationship, there's a U.S.-Mexico economic relationship, and I mean in some instances, maybe in the auto sector or some other sectors, there are some areas where there's kind of a tripartite flow, but mostly they're bilateral relationships.
So I hear what you're saying, and I'm wondering, why have a review period at all? Why not just pull out of the deal? Is that something that's on the table?
I think President Trump would like you. I think, that's your advice to him.
I'm just curious what the case is. What is the case that the administration sees? Because I think economists say that this deal has actually prevented a lot of the, economic catastrophe that people were warning about.
Yeah. So I mean, my own view is there is a world where if Canada, Mexico, the United States all agree to have a similar external trade policy, right? Because USMCA really manages our, cross-border policy between the three countries. We don't really align or have a common external trade policy with respect to dealing with overcapacity from other countries or investment screening within North America. So there are things where you could say there's value there, but I would say we want to. Ultimately, we just want to focus on the American worker. We want to focus on American supply chains and manufacturing. That's where our focus is. If we can have a deal with Mexico, Canada separately or together to make sense for us, we'll do it. There are elements of the USMCA that underlie it. We have common rules of origin about what should have preferential duty treatment and what shouldn't. Maybe those can continue. Maybe we can improve those to make them stronger to incentivize more North American production. So there are areas where we can have trilateral agreement and cooperation, but a lot of it really is bilateral.
Before we let you go, I know you have a busy day. You work very closely with the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. Something tells me his negotiating style is a little different than yours, just given some of the stories there have been about, he likes, there's been stories of punches and the like.
Oh, yeah, the punches.
Yeah. So how does your negotiating style differ?
Well,
exactly.
I'm the straight man in the outfit, like literally, right?
So wait, is it good cop, bad cop, or not? Like, is he bad cop, you're a good cop?
So it really depends, right?
Okay.
Because when it comes to trade, I clearly have a lot of technical expertise.
Yeah.
And so
you're a huge trade nerd. I know that about you.
I wouldn't say nerd.
Sorry.
I'm kind of cool now.
Sorry about
I'm
that.
popular.
Yeah.
But so it really depends. And I think we play off each other well. There are times when he has to rein me in, right? Sometimes with the Chinese,
He has to rein you in.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
I know I don't seem like the kind you'd have to rein in, but it just really depends on the situation. I haven't seen him actually throw the fists in person. I'm waiting for that. The reality is we take a very strategic view. Most technical issues fall within USTR.
Sure.
responsibility, but we work very closely together. A lot of the issues that give rise to our trade issues, do go into the financial world, right? It's about where our deficit's coming from. It's about depressed demand in these countries that have giant surpluses with everybody else. So it makes a lot of sense for us to work together. And obviously I work together with, a lot of other folks, Secretary Rubio, Secretary Letnick, et cetera. I just try to execute and get stuff done.
Got it. All right. Ambassador Greer, thank you
you
very much for joining Axios. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.